Hello again and welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you how I do the process of my digital illustration and digital painting in Photoshop. A couple of examples. I have a tendency to switch up my style of I don't want to say style of the art, but I want to say I switch up how I actually do the process every now and then. So, for instance, this one was done with a different process from this one, but this one and this one were done with the exact same process. Notice how, for instance, with this one, there are pretty definite lines that are kind of close to the same tones as the image itself. But with these two, the lines are all fairly blended in and fall into the shadows or sometimes the highlights of the image. I know right here, like around the nose and the eyes, it's not blended as much, but you can tell with this one, I did actually go ahead and blend out those very harsh lines, besides like right here. Don't know why I missed that one, but I did. And there are a couple in the hair, but that's just kind of how I like to do my hair. Like I said, these two were actually just experimenting with a different kind of technique of adding color in, and I liked this style, but it took incredibly too much time. So I went back and I was starting to do, so I've been working on the iPad recently, and it's a really cool platform because it's a lot like working in Photoshop. The particular program that I use on the iPad is called Procreate, and it is exactly like Photoshop in a lot of ways, but there are a lot of ways where it's very different. You can't really customize the brushes as much in Procreate, but at the same time, there's a lot more sensitivity with the brushes in Procreate. So I think it's really a good tool to use when you're on the go. And I'm actually going to be demonstrating the process of how I did this one. I'm not going to be using this image. I'm actually going to be using a different image, but I'm going to basically go through the process of how I would color an image like this and add value and highlights with this style. So you can see there are still some pretty, not too harsh, but there's some pretty lines there that are not in fact black. All of the lines in this are pink. They're a very dark magenta. And she was supposed to be translucent, and I kind of feel like I did that because you can see a little bit right here with her hair. You can actually see her hair through her arm and through her torso right here. So I feel like I pulled that off pretty well, and you can actually see the glow of the background right here in her little love handles. And then I made her lingerie see-through as well. So I'm going to be going over a similar process, and I'm going to show you how I actually set up my document and everything, just for demonstration purposes. So I always work in Photoshop. Every now and then I will do my line work in Illustrator, but for this one I'm going to be doing all of the line work in in Photoshop, and I will also be doing the color in Photoshop. And so when I open a new document, I always try to give it a name. So I'm actually going to be drawing one of my outfits of the day from a couple of months ago. We're just gonna tag it or name it hashtag OOTD. And then I like to work on a large platform, to work on 11 by 17, because typically when I put my photo that I use into Photoshop, it comes out as about 8.5 by 11. So I just go ahead and work on something that's a little bit bigger to give me some wiggle room, and that way I can actually decide how much I want to crop it, or if I don't want to crop it, if I want to just give it a really cool background. background. I always work with the resolution at 300 pixels per inch. That way it's as crisp as it can possibly be. Since I don't plan on printing this, I work in RGB, and I just leave this at where it's at as 2. I don't really change much of this stuff down here. But if I were to print this, if I were to send this to the printer, that way I can make a poster or something, or even like a note card, I would change this to CMYK. Or I could just work in RGB and then convert it to CMYK later, which would, be no problem. I would just show maybe at the end of this video how to convert it from RGB to CMYK. So, okay, got my document set up. So now I've been, instead of just opening up the image in Photoshop, I've been actually placing a linked photo into the Photoshop file. That way, if something happens and I decide I don't like how the image looks, I can always pull it back up in Photoshop later in its own separate file and work on it like that. So, gotta figure out which thing it's in. I think it's actually in my class file, so yeah, there it is. So this is the outfit of the day that I'm going to be working on here. And I'm not going to be talking the whole time because there's not a lot that I have to say, really. But I'm going to be throwing it into time lapse, that way I don't bore the crap out of you. So the original intention for this was to actually go over the quick keys in this. And I was planning on having something show the quick keys real time, but I wasn't able to find something that could do that with the amount of time that I had. So I'm just going to try to add it in later in Premiere, After Effects or something. That way, like I said, you guys can see what tools I use and what quick keys I use. And then when it comes to doing all of this, I actually use a lot of the same quick keys over and over again because it's literally all the same. Like the brush tool, I use the brush tool all the time. I use there's a lot of different tools that I actually use a pretty good bit, but other than that, I'm not going to explain a whole lot else. Okay, so I got it cropped because this is going to go onto Instagram after I'm done with it. I cropped it to like a, what is this? Looks like it's about 14 3/4 of an inch by 14 3/4 of an inch. So that's just what I'm going to work with. Now, for this one in particular, since I'm going to be explaining the similar process that I did with my Goo Girl, I'm going to do that just exactly. So, when I start off with this, I put the actual image layer onto about a 25 to 45, maybe a little bit darker or lighter, depending on the light in my room. I keep my screen brightness at 100%. That way it is, sorry for the shuffling, I keep my screen brightness at 100%. That way I know exactly what the colors are looking like. I try to orient my screen on my actual desktop. That way it doesn't look funny, the light isn't distorted, and then I start to pick my colors. And so I put all of the different things, when I start actually working, I put all of the different things on different layers. So for instance, I will put the skin on one layer, so this part will be on one layer, this part will be on one layer, and maybe this hand will be on another layer. Like, all of the skin poses will be on one layer, but like I said, the hand, the face, and this hand will all be on one layer. Then these pants and maybe the boots will be on another layer to themselves. This coat will be on a layer, and this shirt will be on its own layer. And I'll probably do the hair on its own layer too. But that's not actually how I start off. I don't start out doing the colors first. I start out using and making the lines. So when I set up my brushes, I go to I select. I originally the way I have my pen programmed, I use a Wacom Intuos 4, which is one of the older Intuoses, and I have my pen set up to where it has quick keys on it itself. It has its two little buttons. One of them is actually supposed to be the space bar, so if you were to press the space bar on your computer, it would turn it into a hand, which is what I just did, which is what you're looking at right now on my screen. I have the little hand icon as my mouse. So that pretty much just allows me to, if I was zoomed in further here, that allows me to move the image around. And I have that as a quick button, or hot button, on my mouse. Now, it has another button, and I use that button as the option button. I believe that's correct. No. Oh, it is control click. It is the control click button. It is the second button that I have on here, which brings up the different brushes that I have and the brush presets. It's a quick menu that is really cool, and I do it on the go. It is really fun to work with just when you're trying to work quickly. And so I sometimes work with one of these chalk brushes up here. At least I did at first, but they came out really sketchy, and the lines were really weird and weight. So I stopped using those, and I started using this one. I don't know why, but just this one in particular, it's easier to actually edit over here because it doesn't have a bunch of stuff to click and unclick. So I turn off buildup, and this is for just line art. I turn off buildup, turn off transfer, and turn on shape dynamics. And then over here it says this control. I'm going to change that from off to pen pressure. That way, when and I'm actually also going to bring this hardness all the way up and the spacing all the way down. That way, actually, I don't know what size my brush is. Whoops, that's how big it is. Now we know. Okay, now I'm going to bring my brush size down a lot. I don't know why. Oh, that's why. Okay, there we go. Okay, let me explain what just happened. So, as you can see right now, I actually can see the circle as to like how big my brush is, right? What happened earlier, why I couldn't see it, I had caps lock on. When you have caps lock on, and I don't know exactly why or how it does that, but it does. Caps lock takes away all of that stuff, and I will probably go in at the end of this video or just say in the comments below why it does that, because it is really dumb. So I always work with caps lock off because it does not do it for me. So I'm gonna make my brush as small as possible without it just absolutely disappearing, because I work really close with my files, because my eyes are kind of broken. No, I'm just kidding. No, my eyes kind of strain a little bit when I try to work farther away from the image. So I'm going to zoom in, and I have gotten out of, I used to do it all the time, but I have gotten out of working with the blackest black I possibly can, because at the end of it, it doesn't blend as well, and it looks just too stark and almost too cartoony. And I try to stay somewhere in between the cutesy cartoon and the semi-realistic. Sometimes. With this one, it probably will be just a little bit closer to the cutesy cartoony type of style. So, but I'm still going to use a very, very dark brown as just a neutral. That's another thing. It neutralizes everything instead of making it so stark. So, depending on what kind of tablet you have, mine, for instance, has a bunch of different buttons on the side that you can program it to. It also has a little wheel on it that it comes pre-programmed, and I don't think you can change it. I've looked several times to try to change it, but it won't. And so the you can see it when I click it. This circle has different programs on it, or not programs, but it has different basically quick key things. So it has the auto scroll and zoom, cycle layers, which I don't use, brush size, which I use all the time, and rotate, which I also use all the time. And those are really just as simple as it can be. So with the auto scroll, it goes in and it goes out, which I don't use it very much because I have another quick key combination that works a lot better. Cycle layers, it literally just cycles layers, and you can see it right over here, kind of flashing like a rave or something. Oh my gosh, now it's freaking out. Okay, stop freaking out. Yay, okay. Brush size, literally just changes the brush size. And then rotate, it rotates the image. Now, let's just say, for instance, I get stuck in a really weird position and I can't get it back straight, right? And my computer's too far away to get it back, my computer's too far away to press shift or something like that. What you can do, and this is how I've been doing it just to try to, I'm going to turn it completely upside down, that way you can see that it actually does work. The way I get it back to the way it's supposed to be, and this is a quick key thing, so if you want to get your image back, press C, which is going to bring up the crop menu, and then you can press B, which brings up your brush. So that's quick key C for crop, and quick key B for brush. Ran out of room there. Okay. Let's see, I did it again. Go. Whoopsie. Oh well. C'est la vie. Okay. So now the part that everybody wants to know about, the line art. So I am going to talk a little bit right here in time lapse, or sorry, right here real time while I work on this. So if I kind of start going like a zombie, just give me a second. I'm trying to process what I'm doing as well as what I'm trying to say. So just bear with me here. And I will also repeat a lot of things. So if I start repeating myself over and over again, forgive me. I will also be trying to demonstrate and explain the different quick keys that I have programmed onto my tablet that I'm using. Speaking of which, let's just go ahead and jump into that. And I will say the quick keys that I use, that I have programmed onto my tablet, are, and these are the ones that I use the most. They're the three. The way the Intuos is set up, it's got 4 buttons on top of. There's the circle in the middle. There's 4 buttons on top and 4 buttons on bottom. I have the 4 buttons on top are not really like relevant to this situation, so I don't really talk about them that much. But the bottom 4 are the ones that I use all the time. They're closer to my hand. They don't have to reach as far. But they are deselect, undo, option, and screen cap. I really need to take screen cap off of there because it doesn't really help me very much. But a fun thing. Option is the color picker button. So let's say I get farther into this painting, right? And there's one particular skin tone that I have created here, but I haven't created it over here and I want to use it. I can color pick from here and then go over here and use it without really having to do all sorts of weird buttons. You can also, another quick, and that's for if you just want to use it really quickly. You just hold down option for a hot second and then you let it go and it goes away. Inversely, you can press on your keyboard I, which brings up the eyedropper tool as well. The only problem is it doesn't go away after you press it. You have to press your next button in order to make it go away. So I'm just going to go ahead and press B again to make that go away, and that way I can get back to work. Now, what I just did right there with the zooming in, that is actually two of the hotkeys that I have programmed onto my tablet and pen. Option plus the space bar, even on your regular computer, is the zoom function, or is a zoom function. So I'm going to put down my pen. That's me putting my pen down. I'm going to press Option, and I'm going to press space bar on my laptop, and it's going to zoom in and out. Well, it's going to zoom out. I don't know why it doesn't really work for zooming in. It's weird. It works better on the tablet because on the tablet you just press Option and for me it's the shift. No, sorry, it's the space bar, not the shift. Option and space bar, and it can go in and out, and that's just going left and right on my tablet. Trying to think if there's anything else that I can really go over here. So one of the questions that I have been asked is, how do you get your lines so crisp and clean? One of my classmates said that she kept having to go back over her lines to make them not so sketchy looking. And it really all just depends on how you have your brushes set up. If you have your transfer on, then yes, it's going to look very sketchy because the transfer does exactly what you would think it does. It starts out light, and the more pressure you put, so just for very quick referencing, I'm very lightly pressing right now, okay? And so the harder you press, the more pigmented the line becomes. And so I'm pressing very lightly again. So that could be one of the big reasons why, if you're having this same problem that my classmate was having, this could be the reason why your lines are so sketchy, is because you have transfer on. Another thing that helps me is I always use a really hard brush with low spacing, or with a zero spacing. That way, because, you know, if you really look at it, if you were to take away the spacing on your different brushes, it would actually be just a circle or whatever the brush is supposed to be or look like. So when I actually draw in real life on a pencil with a pencil and paper, I actually do this. How I am rotating the paper. Or rotating really this window. I always rotate my paper because it gives me the room and the comfort of actually being able to move my hand the way it wants to be able to make these crisp lines. There is this one phrase in particular that has really had an impact on how I draw, and that is pull curves, push straights. So if you really think about it, when you draw a line, when you want to draw, let's say I want to do the curve of this ear right here. I'm going to try to go from this point to this point. And see, that was effortless, absolutely effortless. And it hit the marks, all the marks that it meant to do. And what I did was, I started at the top of my tablet and I brought it down, as you could see. Now, if I tried to do this line right here, it doesn't turn out as good. It turns out it got a little bit kind of like choppy right there and squared, and it didn't follow this line exactly how I like, which sometimes I do change how the shape of the line is. But for this one in particular, I didn't like how that turned out. And see, as you could see, I actually did from the bottom to the top. So I pushed it, where with this one, I pulled it. So I pushed this line away from me and pulled this one towards me. Now I'm gonna do it again with the pulling motion. So much better, so much cleaner. Besides having to clean up that little tag that hung over a little bit from the last line I drew, it's wonderful. And I'm actually going to go ahead and round that off a little bit because I don't have pointy ears. I wish I did, but I don't. So that's just a very valuable tip and thing that I have been recently introduced to, and I've been trying to do that and practice that more often. Push the push. Alright, so I don't really have too much else to explain right now, so I'm going to go ahead and kick it in the time lapse. That way you guys can not have to sit here forever. Because just to typically give you an estimation, I think I've been recording for now about 19 minutes, if that. So that's just and this is part of, and you can see the time there. Over there it says now 7:20. So you can see how long it actually takes me to work on something like this as you're watching it in time lapse. So I'm going to go ahead and get this line art done, and I'm going to come back after I finish with that.
My feelings for you, my feelings for you. I dream I know deep up my feelings for you. watch them grow, perceive, devote. This is the seed, light the show. Watch them grow, I dream, I know. Deep are my feelings for you. Watch them grow, perceive, devote. This is the seed, light the show. Watch them grow. A feeling for you. A feeling for you. Invisible, beating on far past physical with you. I mean it both. See in my heart, it bends for you. I adore you. I dream, I know. Deep are my feelings for you. Watch them grow, perceive, devote. This is the seed, light the show. Watch them grow.
Alright, so there we have it. There's the line art. Now, okay, after this, I would go ahead and, as you can see, let me just kind of actually roughly explain a couple of things that I did while I worked, while I continue to work, because I just noticed this eye looks kind of funny, so I'm going to edit it a little bit, because this is also what I did in the video, or during the time lapse. There are certain things, nobody's perfect. So my line art that I do before I actually put it into Photoshop is not always perfect. So if there's something in the line art that I see in Photoshop that I want to make different, then I do that. I make the lines that overlap the original lines better than what they were in the pencil drawing. So as you can see just there, I changed the eyes and made them a little bit more, and I still don't like how they look, but I might just have to get over it. And you saw it earlier too with that hand that's kind of down and holding the sunglasses. I changed that one as well. And I was trying to change the one, this one, but it just, it still looks funny no matter what I do, so I'm just going to leave it like it is. And you can also look too, if you look at my original sketch versus what I did, just to compare and contrast, you can see I added some very fine little details there, like the nail bed and just the edges, and you can very faintly see the nails there over the edge of the finger, which is something that I'm actually personally working on. I'm trying to not bite my nails as much. Um, and there's actually something that I'm going to fix right here really quick in time lapse, and then I'll come back and talk to you some more. Okay, there we go. Sorry, just a very tiny little detail about that shirt that I forgot to add in there in the original sketch. And I kept trying to remind myself that I was going to add that in later, and there it is. Okay, so at this point, oh, actually, let me go back and review a little bit of what I did. So, as you can see with this shoe down here, I didn't like how the original shoe looked that was on this other foot. So, I made a really good one of this original shoe over here. It's not correct in relation to the figure, but it is correct in relation to how you look at the screen. This left shoe over here, I drew that one really well, and then I copied it and pasted it onto a separate layer because it automatically does that. And I drew it how I made the original shoe look, and there are some things like these straps really probably would not lay like that, but it gets the point across, so I just let it go. It's an illustration. It's not going to be perfect, but it probably should. So from this point, and also with this hand, I just adjusted the angle of it because when I finally got the dark lines down, it just looked like the hand was broken. So I was not gonna deal with that very much. So I'm now going to go in and I'm going to start color blocking. Now color blocking is really just as simple as it sounds. It's taking a flat color of so let's say the skin tone. I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the skin tone. The way I set up my brush for color blocking is I depending on the area that I'm working with, I make it either big or really small. I turn off shape dynamics and I turn off everything in here. A super hard brush, so the hardness at 100% and spacing at 1% since it won't let you go lower than 1. So that's the kind of brush that I work with, and I get in, and sometimes if I'm working with lighter colors, I will change this background to black or maybe like a dark navy blue, but I'm not going to do that right now, just for demonstration purposes. I might do that in time lapse in just a few minutes, but I'm not going to right now. So I make sure to keep my line art on top, that way it doesn't get covered up by whatever, and I'm actually going to change that right now. Line art. And skin. So line art and skin. I'm going to just kind of demonstrate just a little bit. It's super simple. Just literally blocks of color that have no values. There's no shadows, no highlights or depth or anything. No makeup if there's going to be any makeup, which there will be on this one. And it's okay with this to go outside of the lines a little bit. Especially on this hairline, but with this ear right here, I'm going to try to get it as close to the edge as I possibly can because the hair is behind the ear, and obviously the ear doesn't go weirdly off of the side of the head. So I'm going to, and this section right here where I go, it's clearly going onto the clothes. That doesn't matter too much either as far as neatness goes. Don't need that though. Because like I said, the clothes are going to go on top of it the way I have the way I will arrange the layers later. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this into hyperdrive, as I say, and I'm going to finish the color blocking. And if I have any comments in between, I will come in and I will pause it. Well, I won't pause it, but I'll make my comments and then continue with the speed. What's the word I'm looking for here? Anyway, I'll kick it back into hyperdrive. Warp speed, Mr. Sulu!
possible.
All right, so there it is for the most part. There is all of the flat colors down. Oops, I'm not actually on Photoshop. All the flat colors down. I normally go back in and add the eyebrows a little bit later. I try to put them on the same layer as the actual hair. In this one, as you can see, I have two different layers that are hair. One, because the hair is actually going to be a piece of the hair is going to be a different color from the rest of the hair, and then the other one is going to be just like the main body of hair. And as you can see, I also have the different, over here, I have the different layers all named appropriately or semi-appropriately. And one of the things that I like to do is sometimes if, like for instance with the pants, I drew the, oh, I'm sorry, I drew the shirt and the blazer on first. And so I wouldn't have to work as hard to try to get that edge cleaned up. I just made another layer that had the pants on underneath it. That way it would just kind of, I could then go back and flatten the image or flatten the layers and have a pretty seamless line. And now I'm just adding in a couple of things that I forgot about, like the glasses and the earring, which is, no really big deal. I think I'm gonna put those sunglasses on the same layer as the clothes. I'm gonna fill this in really quick. Real time. That way you can see how like really meticulous and I really work. Okay, there we go. Alright, so that is all of the color blocking done. And I'm going to pull up the background so you can see what it looks like on some kind of background. I'm still kind of like off about this leg right here, so I don't know, I might change it. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to put it on a white background real quick. That way you can see the whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to start with I'm actually going to save it real quick. And I have a special file that I put everything in. Typically, I'm actually going to output of the day 2. I typically, if this was actually for my personal purposes, I would put it in my personal file. But since it's for class, I putting it in the Spring 17 folder, which is just the semester that I'm in. Okay, so that's that, and now comes the actual shading and adding value and depth portion of it. And I kind of throw all of it into the same thing together. So let's just get started.
Okay, so at this point, you might be thinking, but Kale, why does it look so different from what you had before? Why are the clothes gray and not black? And there is a very simple explanation. Technology is stupid. No, I'm just kidding. So I originally already recorded this entire process of the shading and contouring and highlighting and adding the effects and whatnot, until I had a little bit of a technical error and my disk drive on my computer decided it wanted to run out of space. So I had, after I got done recording the second half of this video, the file corrupted, so I had to do it all over again. But it's no big deal. I got to have a little bit more practice, and I actually got it done really, really quickly, so it's really no big deal. I don't have too much to say, to explain about this part, because it really is a kind of to each his own, as far as like your style goes and how you paint things goes. I will just like explain a little bit as to how I get the different tones and values that I get. So like for instance with the skin, one of the things that I do with the skin, and this is just mainly in Photoshop that I do this, it's a really fun tactic that is pretty easy. Well, not, I don't want to say easy, but it's a lot simpler than trying to actually guess where your color is. So when I'm picking a skin tone, I take the skin tone that is the base layer that I laid down to start with. I then make a new layer on top of it, and I'll set it to either, sometimes I'll set it to multiply. I think most of the time I set it to overlay. And because what overlay does is it takes the color that you have selected and it makes it darker than what's underneath it. So I will, and you actually see me do it at the very beginning of this. I make a new layer, select the layer of or select the color of the skin, and then I put it on an overlay layer, color pick that new color or new tone that it created, and sometimes it doesn't come out exactly the tone that I want it to be, so I'll adjust it in my little Coolerist color picker there, and then continue to work with it like that. When I'm doing shading, I work with a very, very soft brush, and you'll see me actually open up that brush palette a lot to alter the brush some, whether it be size or softness. And one of the biggest things that I found is really helpful whenever I'm trying to make a very soft shadow is to actually adjust the spacing on it. The more space, like when you look at a brush, if you were to just click once on the brush or once on your artboard with your brush, it would just make a circle, right? Now think about that. Your brush is literally just a little circle. So the closer you put those circles, if you were to like overlap circles upon circles upon circles, they would actually form a long line. So with a very fluffy and very soft brush and those having all of those circles really super spaced out, it makes it a lot softer than what it would originally have been had you had just left the spacing at like 0 or something. So bringing the spacing up to about 25 really helps make that soft brush. And I do the same thing with the, not only with the paintbrush, but with the eraser brush as well. Now, a lot of times what I'll do is like right now with the side of the leg there, with that paneling, it's not completely see-through. It's really just a different texture than the rest of the pants. It's like the pants that I was wearing when I drew this picture were like they're just like a regular cotton fabric on the rest of the leg, but that one little panel there is leather or like a pleather. And so I'm trying to figure out how I want to actually make that kind of pleathery, shiny look to it. I'm trying to think. Some of the other things that I do when I'm working with this. I oftentimes
what I'll do when I'm actually trying to apply the shadows to the different areas of the figure or to the piece itself, let's say I'm trying to do skin. Just like with the actual color blocking process, I will make a new layer on top of whatever layer or whatever shape I'm trying to shade. So again, let's say I'm trying to add highlights and contours to the skin. I'll make a new layer on top of that. Right click on it, select create clipping mask. And what clipping mask does, and I'm sorry, forgive me, I don't remember if I said something about this in the beginning of the video, but what clipping mask does is it applies whatever color you put or whatever you put onto that layer, it only applies it to the layer, to the shape that's on the layer underneath it. So whenever I go in, I don't have to worry about trying to select all of the skin and color on top of it only. I can just go straight in and create a new layer, make a layer mask, and then go in and not have to worry about coloring outside of the edges. And that's one of the reasons why the actual shading process goes so much faster. Now, excuse me for just a second while I take a little break here. I don't know why I left this little part in here, but oh well, it gives me a little bit of time. Same thing goes with everything else that's in the image. So if I want to shade the shirt or the clothes or the pants, same thing. The only difference is, where like I said, when I use an overlay layer to pick the color of the skin, I don't typically do that with the clothes. Since all of the clothes that I was wearing in this were black and white, I literally just shoved my little cursor there in my colorist bar all the way over to the gray side and then adjusted the tones or the shading of the actual grayscale palette.
My feelings for you, love, my feelings for you. I dream I know deep up my feelings for you. Watch them grow, perceive, devote. This is the seed, light the show. Watch them grow. I dream I know deep up my feelings for you. Watch them grow, perceive, devote. This is the seed, light the show. Watch them grow. Grow, grow. Grow, grow.
Establishing a light source is very vital to figuring out where your shadows and light will fall on your figure. So, in this picture, I establish a light source, and where that light source comes from is going to actually be from the top right corner of the page. Now, the great thing about light is once you, or establishing a light source is once you know where your light source is coming from, you can then start to figure out where all of your shadows and other elements of light are going to fall. So, since the light is actually coming from the top right corner of the screen, the shadows, you can already know, they're going to fall on the opposite side of where your light source is. So, light's coming from the top right corner. What's opposite of top right? Bottom left. So all of your shadows are going to fall on the bottom left part of the figure. That even includes the hair underneath the arm there, underneath the coat, anywhere that falls on the opposite side of that light, there's going to be a shadow.
A feeling for you, glow, glow. A feeling for you. Invisible, beating on far past physical with you. I mean it both. See in my heart, it bends for you. I adore you. I dream, I know deep of my feelings for you. Watch them grow, perceive, devote. This is the seed, light the show. Watch them grow.
So, at about this point of the process, I am pretty much done. Just adding a couple of little nitpicky things like adding some highlights under the sunglasses, making sure all the shadows and the lights are in the right places that I wanted to be, and for this particular video, actually showing you what the final product of the first original corrupted run through looked like. I'm also going to adjust the background a little bit to the color scheme that I feel kind of fits it the most. I'm trying to avoid solid black at all costs. So, there we have it. That's the final product of this stream and / tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you to one of my professor, Beverly Leach, for giving me the opportunity to create this video. I am so thankful for everybody who watches this, and if you have any comments or concerns, please feel free to message me. If you need any advice or want someone to help you with anything in Photoshop or even Illustrator, Adobe products in general, I'm in the process of learning them, and I already know a pretty good bit about the software itself. So again, thank you for watching. And I look forward to making more tutorials for whoever would like to see. Thanks. Have a great night. Or, I guess, day, depending where you are.